Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Ellie Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Nir Menussi. Welcome back.
Shalom, Ellie.
Okay, so last time you were here, you were talking about your book, Becoming One.
Yep.
Which I read after we spoke. I shared this with you then, but I'll share it on the, to you directly as well, to your face. I'll say it to your face. What I liked about it was I was very moved by the book, and I shared it with a lot of people. I felt for me, it spoke to me because you spoke a lot. I mean, there were many aspects of the book, but you spoke a lot about the importance of, I think, like that idea of having a relationship with your wife as sister and wife as wife, which I understood from you to mean platonic relationship is the right word, but a relationship, the 2 weeks of the month where intimacy or physical intimacy is not existence, and then the physical intimacy, so that both kind of balance it out. And I felt like my marriage wasn't there. So I number one, I spoke to it. It was very practical. The other was that I've been surrounded by Kabbalistic terms since I'm a teenager, and I hadn't seen it used practically like that. So I felt like I was getting a 2-in-1 with the book, a class on Kabbalah and a class on relationship. I shared the book with a number of people. So thank you for that.
So happy to hear it. Yeah.
And now you're back for this book, the Worlds of Wonder.
Yep.
Okay, so this is another book with you and Rav Yitzhak Ginsburg.
Yep.
So,
New Gateways to Kabbalah and Chassidut.
New Gateways to Kabbalah and Chassidut. A beautiful design. Nice.
Yeah, I did it. I did it myself.
That design?
Yeah.
The Star of David, does it have like a little bit of a, controversial take? Like in some religious communities, they don't see it as a holy symbol, others do, or it's...
Not that I know of. There's a historical debate how much it was really in the time of David. It's more of an academic debate, but the symbol is a Jewish symbol, is very profound, and it has a lot of significance to it. And here, the point of the cover here is that it's like a stained glass window with a lot of colors, a lot of different shapes. But at the very center, there's just one that's clean, that's transparent, and it's like a point of ayin, like nothingness. So the idea is that the Torah itself, the light of the Torah, which is the Magen David shape, that's something very, very subtle, very pure, very almost sort of whitish, like faith, emunah. It's something very it doesn't have a color, it doesn't have a shape.
Which means what? Like intangible, or what do you?
Yeah, it's like the idea that there's one creator for everything, and it's the only way to connect to it is like a still small voice or a subtle sound of silence, right? And it's something that you get to it by basically getting rid of all the other noise.
Okay.
When all the noise dies out, you have that thing. But that light can go through the stained glass, and then it becomes very, very colorful. And it talks about a whole, a wide array. It can touch a wide array of topics and a wide array of life, areas. And it's the same light. That's the idea of the book, that it's a collection of essays, right? It doesn't have one topic. It's a collection of essays. It's 30 essays written over a few years.
So give us a little bit of a teaser. I flipped to one. I'll ask, but you can pick another one if it's that. I saw one where man and woman, right? I guess in Hebrew, Ish and Isha are very similar names, but in that there's something symbolic about the roles of masculine and feminine.
Yeah, basically the idea of the book is it has several goals. So one goal is to introduce people to the whole world of Kabbalah and Chassidut, which is very cryptic for many people, very obtuse.
Yeah, similar to what I was just sharing a few minutes ago about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's not systematic. It doesn't, introduce you to all the areas, but it pulls you into what is it all about, a little bit the history of Kabbalah, how it transitioned into Chassidut. And then most of the essays are about now taking this very, very profound wisdom that has a lot of terminologies and a lot of models, and taking that and just demonstrating in relatively short essays, like 2,000 words each. It's like each one is like a sandwich, I call it. And each one is a standalone essay. And it shows you how you take this language and this wisdom, and you can then apply it to any area of life, just any area of life. So there's a bunch of essays on masculinity and femininity and relationships. And so that one, the one you mentioned, for example, goes into the Hebrew words, ish and isha. I call it Hasidic gender studies, and an exercise in spiritual linguistics. You go into the Hebrew words ish and isha that have two letters in common. One letter is different,
Right.
and just from the shape and numerical value and other characteristics of the letters and the way they're placed, because with ish it's in the middle, with isha it's at the end. All these tiny little details, they contain a wealth of understanding about the spiritual differences between masculinity and femininity. So that's one example. And then there's a whole bunch on Torah and science, how to integrate the scientific worldview with the Torah worldview. There's a whole bunch of essays on how to balance our Jewish identity with being human beings, good human beings, with the whole idea of being part of mankind in general, and a whole bit about Jewish psychology and what would make that unique and different from other kinds of psychology. So very rich, like a buffet, like a spiritual buffet. That's this book.
So you mentioned psychology, and we also spoke a little bit earlier. You're talking about a talk you're giving tomorrow at the House of More, Jungian psychology.
Yeah.
So I think Freud is probably considered, as far as his ideas are, not very Jewish. He's Jewish, but his ideas are not very Jewish.
Yeah.
Psychological ideas. Jungian is where in that...
Jungian was not Jewish,
right.
But his ideas are far more compatible with Judaism, as they are generally with religion, spirituality.
Right.
Yeah.
His father, I believe, was a Christian pastor or something.
It's very interesting. The whole story is a very interesting example in history of a Jew distancing himself, or maybe to begin with, was totally so distant, but to the point of negating anything that had to do with spirituality, a spiritual outlook, the idea that there is a soul, the idea that there is intrinsic meaning to life, to the world. He explained away any kind of mystical experience as just
hallucinations,
as an hallucination, or you just wanting to go back to the womb. He said basically it's your longing to be back in the womb, to be protected, and to sort of merge with the universe. But it's backward looking. It's not forward looking. There's nothing up there. There's nothing. There's no divine soul. There's no divine spark. There's
nothing
no divinity. The whole world is just, it's all happening by chance. And he even said at some point that between the two main drives that he called Eros and Thanatos, right, which is love and death, really it's all death. At some point he said that. We all just want to merge back into the physical matter. But there's a time throughout life that we crave life. But ultimately, everything is going to melt back into entropy, and our old souls also want to. So he was just a terrible reductionist. He was a genius, but he was a materialist and a reductionist. But he was Jewish. And then as a Jew, you say, how can you be so far away? But that's part of the thing. Jews go all the way with whatever they're doing. So Jews are at the forefront of every ism there is, and Freud was an example. And then he has a student who's not Jewish, who's Christian, who's Swiss. And he connects to spirituality in such an intense way, and religion and mythology. And there's even stories of people that he helped them go back to their Jewish identity. Really? And by the way, he did the same for me. For me, growing up totally secular, just like Freud, suddenly opening up to spirituality and mysticism and realizing it's not all nonsense. And maybe there are some, superficial mystics, but there are also some very profound mystics. And just all this opening up, then one of the first things I was told was, you got to read Jung. You have to read Jung. He's exactly talking about the secular modern world that lost its soul, that lost its meaning, and how to. So it was a major, step for me on the way to Judaism.
Oh, I'm connected to him as well, but not directly.
Yeah.
But he influenced the 12 steps, and I feel like I found God in the 12 steps.
I didn't know the influence of the 12 steps.
So there's early correspondence between him and I think it's Bill Wilson. It may have been the other founder of 12 Steps.
Mm-hmm.
There was early correspondence, and some of the things he shared, have you heard the line spiritus contra spiritum, which is spirituality to counteract the spirits, right?
Against spirituality?
Spirituality to counteract the power of the spirits being alcohol. What he shared was that he's worked with a number of alcoholics, and there were some which none of nothing that he can offer help them other than a profound spiritual transformation. So he was giving support to the early founders' ideas that using spirituality as a way to heal alcoholism was sound.
Very interesting. And so we both, in a way, reconnected in some way through his help. So there's an amazing story I just learned a few days ago. I was in LA, and my hostess was this older Balat Tshuva, like from the 60s. And she told me this amazing story. I quickly looked it up and I found it. That one day Jung had a dream. In his dream, a young woman patient came to him and told him her story, and he couldn't figure out at all what to do. That was the dream, that he sat there as a therapist and he had no idea what was going on. He only had this intuition that it's a father complex, but he couldn't make out what's going on. And the dream ended. Next day, this woman comes in, and she is a very bright, a Jewish, very modern Jewish woman. She had to leave her previous therapist because he fell in love with her, and he told her we can't go on. But she was very neurotic and had a lot of issues. And he started talking to her, and then he realized that this is the girl from the dream. The dream was like a premonition of this woman. So he starts looking for the father complex, but there's no father complex. She admires her father. Her father is like her, very modern, very secular. So he doesn't know what to do. So he asks her, "Can you tell me about your grandfather?" And then she goes still, and he realizes, I got it. And then she says, "Oh, he's very religious. He's part of some religious sect, and I don't connect with him at all." And he asked her, "Would that sect be the Hasidim?" So she says, "Yes." And then he asks her, "Would he by any chance be a tzaddik?" So she goes, "Yeah, he's a big rabbi, and people come to him. They feel that he has second sight, but it's all nonsense." And then he tells her, "You may not like what I'm about to say, but I think that your father turned his back on the secret. And now the fear of God is creeping back into your consciousness. And that's what is causing all your problems, is that the fear of God, Yirat Hashem, right? Awe of your grandfather. And basically he was telling her, you have to go back to the path of your grandfather." And she was totally shocked. It was like a lightning bolt. And she left very confused. And then he had another dream. And that was the more amazing dream. The other dream was that he meets her in some reception with a lot of people. And she comes up to him and she asks him, "Do you have an umbrella? It's pouring rain. It's pouring rain on me. I don't know what to do. Do you have an umbrella?" And he fumbles with the umbrella. And then he finds himself on his knees offering the umbrella to her like to a goddess.
Okay.
And then the next day she comes.
This was a dream at a later time.
A dream like a week later.
Okay.
And then the next day she comes for the second session. And then he says that all of her problems went away. So this is very, very interesting because it's an amazing story about Jung bringing a Jew back to his source, but it's also clearly he was opening up her, what we call the crown, superconscious. He opened it up for her. And then she had this experience of being flooded by this abundance, spiritual abundance, that she was unaware of. Oh, and then he adds something else in telling the story. He says, she was a very mystical soul. I saw that she was a mystical soul, and she had the potential to be a saint. It was using his own terms. But she didn't have the language. All she knew was the material world and the intellect and sexuality, because apparently she was very, like a temptress type. That's what happened with the other. And she was very materialistic because that's the only life she knew, and that's the only language she knew. I had to just open her up to the language of the mythical, of the mystical, and it opened up for her. So he opened up the crown for her, but then he gave her the umbrella, which is the tzimtzum. It's the light in the vessel.
Right.
It's like to close up a little bit, because then you need to do the diminishment, the tzimtzum, of how to gradually bring the light into your vessel and expand the vessel, not break the vessel.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
so I want to get your take on a personal story. So besides for Jung's influence on the 12 steps, when I first came into recovery, my therapist was a Jewish therapist, but he was interesting. Even though he was religious, he stayed away from any spirituality with me. which afterwards I wondered why, because when I found it very helpful years later.
Yep.
What I mean spirituality is like, is there a purpose behind this? Is there maybe meaning? Like you're going through your struggle. If there's a God that's directing you, what is, even as a perspective, not as an absolute, but let's say there's a director to your story. What could he be, he or she could be suggesting? In any case, he introduced me to a Jewish gentleman who was in recovery for the 12 steps. And I met with him a couple of times. Then he got me into going to the 12 steps. He was 15 or 20 years married. His wife had found out about some cheating behaviors. So in many ways was helpful. I saw that, hey, if I don't get healthy now, like this is where my life could go. But then within the 12 steps, there's tons of language around. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but God is mentioned several times. Higher power is mentioned, meditation, prayer. It's filled with these terms, you know? I'll give you one step. It says, sought through prayer and meditation. This is the 11th step. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out, right? So this is like, you know, it's like,
that's like the famous serenity prayer.
Right. So the serenity prayer,
similar. Yeah.
It's right. The serenity prayers, I don't know where it came from, the serenity prayer, but they say it a lot.
Yep.
At the beginning and end of meetings, you'll usually hear it. God grant me the serenity. But the steps have 1 through 12. Step 1, and there's each one could be elaborated and elucidated forever, right? Within each one, there's packed a tremendous amount of wisdom. Why did they use the word conscious contact and not contact?
Oh,
right?
oh, wow.
Right. You can get very deep into it, and people do. So especially the Jews who go into it. In any case, so I'm seeing all of this language around God, and I'm speaking to my sponsor about it, and he says, I'm not, that's not what I take from the program. God is group of drunks, you know, acronym group of drunks. You need a higher power. Your room is a higher power. And while he was helping me and I was talking to him, there was something that wasn't, I was like, you're basically taking the language and doing a complete 180 with it.
Yep.
So I started looking for another sponsor, and some guy tells me, oh, in another meeting, there's a guy, he has good spirituality. Like, go meet with him. So I meet this guy. This guy was a Christian monk.
Yeah.
And at this point, he wasn't living in a monastery, but in his life, he did at some point. And I was moved by his spirituality, his connection to God. I mean, it turns out he had a real dark side as well. I mean, he had a home in those meetings. But he taught me a lot about that. And I felt, when you use that expression, like open the crown, he definitely was involved in some way in opening, like removing whatever part of the Arla has been removed from my eyesight. And he was heavily, like I said, heavily Christian. But he told me, which was interesting, because a lot of his other sponsees he would take to church and pray with them. He told me, he said, your healing you'll know your healing has taken root when you reconnect to Judaism. So he shared that with me, which he didn't have to, right? I mean, he could have, I was very open at that stage. I was kind of broken. I mean, he could have taken me to church also. In any case, this is where we eventually went different ways, found other sponsors. He passed away a few years ago, but my wedding happened to be in Florence, just outside of Florence, at a hotel that was formerly a Christian monastery. Today, just a hotel. But there were a few things. When we came, we rented out the hotel. I said, you know, there's a cross on the outside. I said, do you mind covering it? There was a picture of the Last Supper, and they were very accommodating. We'll put everything aside. You know, I spoke to Rabbi, I let her pray in the shul. He said, yeah, as long as it was painted, whatever, everything was fine. But over the course of the Shabbos, people kept making references. It was a hotel, but people kept making references to, what this was, like what a depraved place this was. And here we have this, like a Jewish celebration happening. So maybe it's the first time mitzvahs were done here. Maybe it's the first time something positive. And every time I heard it, it was irritating something in me. Like, why are you turning this? It's not my experience of Christianity. I mean, just my personal experience. So at my wedding, I got up and spoke, and I said, in many ways, I feel like I'm here as a celebration of both. I've been influenced by Judaism. I had a very Jewish wedding. Even though I wasn't religious, we made a very Jewish wedding. Kosher food, and it was very difficult to do kosher food in the hotel there, and everything. It was Jewish to the nines. A Sephardic singer, a Ashkenaz singer, we had different elements of it. We had the arguments, everything, all aspects of Judaism. But to me, I felt like the reason, or one way to explain why I was having a wedding in a place that was a former monastery, was that in some way I was influenced positively by this religion, whether through the 12 steps or through my sponsor personally, and that's what I shared. So having been affected by Jung in the way you have, what says you about this kind of, this story?
The whole relationship between Judaism and Christianity has two sides to it that have been very beautifully articulated by Maimonides. He says that on the one hand, there's something very basic about Christianity that is, it's like a kind of misinterpretation of the Torah. And as Jews, we see it, we feel it very clearly. It takes away much of the most basic ideas about Judaism and peels them away. It preserves the idea of there being a one God,
kind of,
and even that is with a big kind of.
But I've heard from non-Jews that belief is not.
Yeah, so that
is okay.
It's also complicated, right? It's called shituf.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it is, but on the other hand, it's not pure monotheism, which is something we also wish to share with the world at some point. So that's one thing, and it keeps the biblical story, the idea of Genesis, and on the other hand, it takes away the whole idea of the physical commandments, and it takes away the idea of the role of the Jewish people, because it basically says that it was, it shifted, it moved
right
to what they call the new Israel, which is the congregation of believers in Jesus. So and also we've been persecuted. We have a long, bloody, painful history of the Christianity. The other aspect of the whole story is, in the words of Maimonides, that both Islam and Christianity serve a role, an important role in the divine providence, in bringing the light of the Torah and the light of monotheism to the world. It's a gradual process, and so they don't just hide or cover up; they also reveal and spread. And these two religions took over the world, right? And they count billions of followers.
It must be 50% of the world between the two.
More.
Wow.
It's more than 50% of the world. We're talking 2.2 Christians and 1.7 or 8 billion. 2.2 billion Christians, 1.8 billion. That's altogether more than half of the world. Sees itself as walking in the footsteps of Abraham in one way or another. Maybe not primarily Abraham, right, but it goes all the way back to him. So that's a pretty amazing thing. And I like to refer to Christianity and Islam as like two film adaptations of the original book. The original book is the Bible. And not so many people read books, but a lot of people watch movies. So there's a tiny people that are going with the book, but there are billions of people who go and watch, or they love one of the two film adaptations. But as like with every adaptation, so much is left in the editing room, and so much is changed, and you add things, you take away things. And if you know the original book, you feel like saying, yeah, the movies they're amazing, but you have to read the book. You got to read the original book, right? You're missing out on the real deal. And in a way, that's what we as Jews, I think, our purpose is to show people that Christianity took elements of the Torah and writ large, those elements, very large, but took away a whole bunch of other elements. By the way, Islam adopted from the Torah almost exactly all the elements that were not taken by Christianity. Christianity took the spirit of love and prayer and
faith,
and faith and mostly love and chesed. And Islam took the element of something not so otherworldly, this worldly. There's no monasteries. You want an earthly kingdom, political kingdom. It's a political religion. Christianity is all about divorcing religion and politics. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what belongs to God. It's a famous line from the New Testament. So and Islam, it went in the opposite direction. It was all about politics. It was very practical. It has practical commandments. Right. It has like a law, a bit like a Jewish law, lahavdil. And the only people who can believe that you can, through a kind of interfaith approach, you can make them all live together are Jews, because Christians Christianity and Islam have nothing in common. But Judaism has a lot in common with both, because they both come from Judaism. So only Jews can believe that all religions can coexist. But for Christianity and Islam, it's a battle for everything and everyone. Each one of them basically wants to take over the entire world. Anyway, so I'm saying there's an element in both that they warp or they hide or they change the shape of the original vision, but they also spread some of its light. And then you can have stories like that story a little bit that for someone who is a secular Jew and very far away, and that's what Jung did to me and you, and that's what maybe the story that you had with the wedding, is that all of a sudden meeting a Christian, talking to a Christian, and seeing this kind of biblical faith in action doesn't threaten us maybe, or it doesn't intimidate us as an Orthodox Jew would. And then in a very interesting, beautiful, divinely guided way, it helps us come back. So it can happen, but we have to address the complexity.
Yeah, no, I wasn't looking. I wasn't expecting like a haskama on Christianity. That was more about like the blanket depraved state of this place. I was like, it's not my experience of it. I couldn't be true to myself if I didn't acknowledge what I owe to practitioners of the faith. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about. There was a concept you shared. I've been listening to your podcast. Good amount in the past few months, and there was something on Hanukkah, around Hanukkah time, which we were talking about just before, but that struck me. I shared it a couple of times in different settings of the Jewish warrior, right? The gematria of Hashmonai being both Gibor and Tzaddik, and I thought
Gibor, for those who don't speak Hebrew, Gibor being a hero,
a warrior
or a hero. And tzaddik being a holy righteous man.
Yes. And then the Chashmonai
if you
kind of
took the numerical
both.
value of both words, you put it together, you get the word Chashmonai, that was the warriors, the holy warriors of Hanukkah.
Right. And how amongst the Orthodox Jews, we've kind of lost the story, the spirit of the warrior Jew. And amongst the secular Israeli, probably more Israeli Jews, they've reminded us of the part
they
we forgot.
They revived the vision of there being you can be both Jewish and a hero and brave and with muscles and a fighter and a soldier.
Right.
But then they lost the tzaddik element. I grew up. I wanted to be a hero. I didn't want to be a tzaddik. What is a tzaddik? I don't care about tzaddikim. And if you grew up in a frum family or community, mostly you would hear about tzaddikim. There's tons of tzaddikim stories. But the Giborim, not so much.
Right. That's what I connected to because it felt almost like that was the only path they were charting. If you could, do Talmud learn the whole Talmud, then you've reached the top of the mountain. But there's actually two mountains.
Yeah. It has to do, by the way, with the written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah is full of wars and heroes, and you have Shimshon. He's a very chaotic hero. It's called he's called a Mashiach of Shel Tohu. He's like a precursor to the Mashiach, but he's not the final version. Then you have David, who's far more balanced, and a whole bunch of other warriors and heroes. And it's a heroic book, the Bible, in many ways. And the Talmud is written in the time when we are ruled by the Romans. We don't have political power. We don't have military power. And then the focus would be on the tzaddik. But the Chashmonaim, interestingly, are a real combination because they were priests and they would serve in the temple, and they would also in the time-wise, it's in between. It's the early stages of Chazal, of the sages, what we call the Tkufa of the Zugot, the first pairs. It wasn't yet the fully
pairs
formed, like Hillel and Shammai, and it was early generations of the Mishnah. And it was still coming out of the biblical time, going into the time of wisdom, that the echoes of prophecy and the heroism were still in the background. But the whole world of Jewish learning was not yet fully formed as we know it. So they lived in that time, and they were priests who worked in the temple, who were very into the subtle work of lighting the menorah. But then when the call to heroism came, they took it upon themselves and they came out. And the fact that the gematria is just like an illustration or a formula of the fact that in many ways the full Jew, the whole Jew, and the wholeness of Judaism takes in both what we now call the frum or religious energy and the secular Zionist energy and meshes them together. I think now with the war, that's what we're all dealing with. We are called upon to be fighters and warriors, and we're very impressed by this. But then you see suddenly, and that's a new thing, it didn't happen in previous wars, you see all the soldiers wanting to put on tzitzit. And
this is new?
It's very new.
Oh, interesting.
And then doing all the Kabbalat Shabbat and taking Zalms with them. And you have the hostages coming back one by one saying, I connected to faith. So there's a whole amazing faith revival through the war alongside this heroism. So it's still a way to, there's a way to go with how to balance the two. You don't want the tzaddik element to go into a kind of ascetic religious type, and you don't want the hero to be a kind of macho hero. You want the hero to be refined. You want the tzaddik to be grounded. That was what the whole Chanukah idea was. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't able to find, because you mentioned like the 36. You mentioned the 36 tzaddikim and the 36 heroes of David, but I wasn't able to find.
Okay, so I'll get you the source afterwards.
Yeah, that was. But I didn't only see the warrior as the like physically fighting, but sometimes there's a certain. I felt like during COVID, right? Let's say there was a certain toughness that a lot of people showed. Hey, whatever you're doing to us is not cool, right? And there's certain people who stood up to that, and that wasn't necessarily tzaddik energy. That was gibor energy, but it didn't necessarily take big muscles. But it took big cojones. A
gibor is someone who overcomes. That's the meaning of the word in Hebrew, lidgaber. Overcomes obstacles. He doesn't succumb to where things are going, and he's a rebel. And of course, he can take on many forms. It doesn't have to be physical.
Right. Yeah.
And that spirit, in many ways, but the book that we talked about, in many ways, tries to restore a spirit of adventure, a spirit of exploration. A spirit of wonder, as in the title, that in many ways, in many places, Judaism is lost. There's a feeling of playing it safe, and there's a feeling of being very much traditional and going back to retreading familiar ground. And the reason I like bringing in science and bringing in psychology and bringing in culture, I also go a little bit into exploring the whole world of imagery, of more mythological, cinematic imagery that comes from outside of the Torah that people are, they love.
Like movies.
And the Torah doesn't seem to address enough because we have our little, reservoir of stories, and we don't have superheroes. We don't have, mystical, maybe adventures so much. But it's not true. It's just that all those imagery, all those energies, you can find a way of elevating them if you look at them through Torah lens. That's what I'm
Can you give an example?
Interested in mostly. So there's a whole bunch of there's one there that goes into the mythological figure of Tammuz. Tammuz was an idol. And we have a name, we have a month named after him.
Tammuz is an idol?
Tammuz was an idol.
Okay. From where?
Dumuzi, it was Babylonian.
Okay.
And the fact that, and there's a story in Ezekiel that they put the Tammuz idol in the Holy of Holies. After the temple was destroyed, in the place of the Holy of Holies, they put the Tammuz, and the women would come and weep over the Tammuz. That's a verse in Ezekiel. And so the question is, how could we adopt all the names, the Hebrew names of the months are Babylonian, but they don't mean anything. Cheshvan and Tishrei and Kislev, they have, here we know the meaning. The meaning is that this is a false idol. And not only that, but it was an idol. There was like a young, beautiful god that died when he was young. It's a tragic story. And basically, the whole story about the Tammuz is the love of tragedy. It's the precursor of Greek tragedies.
Oh, interesting.
And you have this young figure and then you fall in love with this young figure and you start crying. And they had, in the way that it worked, the idol worship of this statue, it was a hollow statue, and they would put lead in the eyes, and they would heat it up from the inside, and the lead would melt, and would appear to be crying. So we call it here the world's first tearjerker, because it manipulates you into crying. And that's the source of tragedies. It's the source of worshiping
almost tragedies
all those
as
idols.
Entertainment.
Sorry?
Tragedies as entertainment.
As entertainment.
Yes.
And it gets you hooked up on a very superficial kind of sadness, which is jerked out of you, like those tears. And how do we incorporate this element of tragedy, which is basically an element of looking at the tragic aspect of the world, but not succumb into what we know as Greek tragedies? And we have a lot of movies today that are all about basically saying that the world is ultimately tragic, that there's no light at the end of the tunnel,
right.
that there's no hope, the world is meaningless. How do we not fall into that, but not also go into a kind of cheap optimism, which is smiling and projecting that everything is good, everything is for the best, right? God is taking care of everything, we don't have
right.
a tragedy, God has a plan, God has an answer, and everything you should say a blessing for. And why are people attracted to tragedies? Because they feel that it reflects
reality,
pain in the world. So how do you balance the pain and reflecting and addressing the sometimes tragic incidents that we have, like now,
yes,
with hope. The hope that monotheism brings to the. So that the whole essays there is on how to incorporate the feeling of sadness and pain and sense of meaninglessness into a worldview that everything is meaningful in the end. So that's one example. And the other example is, we said we're going to talk about this, is the whole idea of the hero's journey. That we spoke about Gibor, and we spoke about Jung.
Joseph Campbell.
And Joseph says, then you get to Joseph Campbell also.
Yes.
So before that, I think there's one thing we need to address. It's a bit meandering, this whole talk, but maybe that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Is that we spoke about Jung bringing Jews back. We spoke about there was Freud, and he was very Jewish, and he came up with psychoanalysis, but he was totally materialistic. Then you had Jung bringing in the spiritual, and then everyone with a little bit of spiritual sensibility can breathe a sigh of relief, because Jung brought back spirituality into psychology. But then I think there's another step to be made back into what Judaism can bring to the table. Because there is, I think, in as much as I love Jungian psychology and literature, and it gave me a lot, there is something very profoundly missing, which Judaism, let's say, put it this way, Judaism challenges Jungian psychology. Because Jungian psychology is only looking for universal archetypes. The idea is that there's a collective unconscious, and all mythologies and all religions have a basic infrastructure that they share. It comes from the human mind or the human potential. It's not just like a neurological thing. Maybe you can find a neurological underpinning, but it's something very mystical for Freud. There's really a collective unconscious.
For Jung.
For Jung, sorry. But then what happens is that you look at all mythologies and religions and you ignore the particulars. You strip away all the particulars and you get to what Campbell called the monomyth. There's monomyth. Okay. The one myth. There's only one myth. And that's this collective unconscious. And then it puts on different shapes. So
it's kind of one story being told a million times.
One story told a million times. He called it the hero with 1,000 faces. Yeah. And there was this series of interviews that Joseph Campbell was interviewed, and it was called The Masks of God. And the idea was that there's one God, but many, many different masks. But the thing is that, every tradition that cherishes its details would feel a little bit offended. Right. That now you're stripping away, it's only universal. But I think Judaism would take even more of an issue with this idea than most others, if not all. Because Judaism, we not only cherish the details to the point that every detail in every story, biblical story, Talmudic story, we would analyze and see as containing aspects, as being an essential part of the story. There's this metaphor in Kabbalah and Chassidut that the best animal to take, it's not the animal that was in the original metaphor, but it's better for us, is you think about the turtle and the shell. In cartoons, you can see the turtle coming out of the shell and then going back into the shell. But we know it's not true because the shell is growing out of the spine. The shell and the turtle are totally connected. You can't separate them. The idea that you can extract the essence, the gist, right? The gist is like the ghost, the spirit of the story. From the story is fundamentally not a Jewish idea. For us, it's like the turtle and the shell. The external details, they grow out of the skeleton. They're part of the inner essence of the story. You can't say, oh, let's take away the shell and look at the turtle itself. Right. The turtle itself, the shell is part of the turtle. And if you get to the gist, then you lose all the details that the greatest mysteries, the greatest secrets, the greatest depth is in those details. So not only do we really cherish the details, but we say they hold the deepest,
right? The
deepest meaning.
And they're distinct, being the same story multiple times.
Yeah, and so for example, Aesop's fables, right? The Greek writer of fables. For him, it didn't really matter if it was a stork or a fox. For him, there was a message, a moral, and you can extract the moral.
Right.
And that's where maybe Jung was drawing from, this whole idea that the details don't really matter so much. But for Jews, it's very, very different. And here, there's this image that has been walking with me since I was a child, and I think that's a very good illustration of what Judaism is basically trying to tell Jungian psychology. It's an image from the movie E.T.
Okay.
So in E.T., there's E.T. is in itself very much a Jungian kind of story because it's like a fallen angel, or it's like the soul that fell into this world, and then the adults don't really see it, they ignore it, they don't understand it, but the kids do see it because the kids still remember their soul, something like this. And there's a point that they're hiding the alien. The kids are hiding E.T., the alien, in their house. And then the mother is all of a sudden is about to storm their room because for some reason, and then we're all missing a beat because she's going to find the alien. And she gets to the room, she doesn't see the alien, and we know the alien is in the cupboard. And she gets to the cupboard, she opens it up, or the closet. She opens it up, and then we're terrified, but then we see what she sees. She sees a whole bunch of toys and puppets, and among them, and the whole sort of bunch, the alien is resting his head in between, superhero masks and teddy bears, and just not blinking. And of course, the mother doesn't remember the toys of the kids. She doesn't care about the toys it's childish. And she mistakes him for one of the toys. And then she closes the closet, and we sigh of relief that she didn't get it. And so what's the idea is that the Jungian is like the guy opening the closet, and he looks at all the mythologies. And he's saying it's all masks of God. And I don't care about the details because it's all, I'm looking for the essence and the universal mythology, the monomyth. Right. But he doesn't realize that one of the faces is not a mask. It's a real face, it's a living face. And for us, that's the Torah. The Torah is not just a Jewish mythology and then we can extract the gist. This is God's wisdom revealed in such a way that the particulars, the language and the words and the names, it's like almost like the quote unquote the facial features of God Himself. And so that is for me something that everyone who loves Jung and falls in love with this idea that you realize, oh my God, the flood story, it's everywhere. The Savior story, it's everywhere. The serpent and the woman, there's all these variations, and people are amazed by the similarities, and they should be, because it is something that we see the one light spread all over the world. The next step should be, but maybe in the Torah, the details aren't a mask that you need to peel away. If you're going to peel it away, it's going to peel away the face itself. Right. And so that led me to thinking about the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell presented. And I had this intuition that if we're going to compare it to biblical stories, it's going to work only partially.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't know this, but I had
Right.
this for years. I've been walking around with this idea.
Okay, interesting.
That it's one day I need to sit down with the hero's journey template and see if it really works with a biblical story, and then see where it doesn't work.
And you do that in this book?
No, this book,
Okay.
no, that's now.
Okay.
But this book gives a lot of the foundations for how to do such.
So you're working on this book now?
It's a project. I don't know if it's going to be a book. Maybe hopefully one day. But it's something that I'm.
Maybe a movie. You were saying that it's just we're missing some of the cinematography.
Yeah. So the first thing you see is that it doesn't work with almost any of the heroes, any of the protagonists of the Bible. It took me a long time to find one that the template works in, and that was Yaakov. Jacob is the closest
to the hero's journey.
To the hero's journey.
And did you take other stories from other religions?
Oh, that you can find a whole bunch of literature about this.
But I'm saying, but looking at it and trying to see if it doesn't match.
So there could be a good exercise.
Yeah.
And it's not for me. I'm really interested, and I have this faith that, it's a faith that the Torah, the details of the Torah are eternal and divine, and I don't share that faith about other.
Right.
I am a Jungian compared to other mythologies. Sorry. But I'm also, that would be a challenge for them. So if someone cares about their own tradition, I have a feeling that many of the mystical traditions, I heard this from Hindu mystics, that they're saying themselves, the details of the Hindu mythology and all the thousands of gods that they have, I got a feeling, and some of them said it very clearly, they don't address it so much meaning and so much weight. They don't have the kind of, they're saying it's all the masks of God. And God is one, it's one spirit, it's one energy, cosmic energy. And that's why you have a lot of Indian mystics, Far East mystics, that would tell the Jew, go back to your religion. They would tell everyone, go back to their religion, because they don't address the same kind of absolute value to the details and the particulars of their own mythology. And if there is someone somewhere who thinks that those particulars are very, and I'm not a Muslim and a Christian. Muslims and Christians took this idea from the Torah, the idea that the details, Muslims more than Christians, by the way, that the details and the wording are very crucial. Christians don't have put so much emphasis on the language because they're used to reading everything from translation anyway.
Right.
The Bible, most of them read in whatever language it's translated to. All throughout the Middle Ages, it was the Latin. So anyway, they start out with they're reading a translation, and they know a lot of it is lost in translation, and it's not that of a big deal because you care about the moral, the gist, the main thing, the main message. So the language doesn't really matter. For Muslims, it's different. They took, we said before that they took, the Quran has to be read in Arabic. You can't appreciate it unless you read it in Arabic, and you have the exact word. And that was all inspired by the way Jews
read the Torah. Oh, that's why you were surprised when I said reading the 12 steps in that way, that every word matters.
So Jews, because then it would go and address with the same kind of.
Right.
Yeah. So I could go to other mythologies and do it, but I feel it's for people to if they cherish their own tradition so much, they would want to do what I would do to the hero's journey. By all means, go ahead. Let's see what happens. But I don't see. Again, I think Judaism takes an issue with this more than other traditions. But I may be mistaken. I don't know. But yeah. So.
Is there a certain unifying theme to all of your work, or something that you're trying to get, I don't know, those you impact, those you influence to receive? Have you summed it up in?
Because my story is that I grew up as far away from Judaism as possible, and I was immersed in so many secular, Western ideas, and I was inspired by it, whether it's science or art or psychology or history. And then I discovered the Torah, and I was blown away by the depth and sophistication and it was like every insight I came to very gradually. I came to the Torah, especially Chassidut, and it was there put so beautifully, so minimalistically. I said, and I realized that it took me years to realize, right, to put peace together in all kinds of ways. Suddenly, someone told me, like just like submission, separation, sweetening. It's 3 terms from the Baal Shem Tov.
Submission.
First,
separation.
you have to submit your ego, submit the physicality, submit the externality of things. Only once you submit it, that you're not overpowered by the lower aspects of things. You can start separating the lower from the higher, the physical from the spiritual. This is a process
for what? Submission, separation, sweetening.
For everything, like for every kind of journey and transformation and change. And the separation is trying to separate within you the high and the low, the animal and the divine, the external and the internal, or whatever it is you're reading. But you can't jump to the separation without the submission coming first, because then you're wrapped up in the lower reading of things. So
submission would be, let's say in your case, right? Submission would be, I'm willing to let it all go.
I'm willing to admit that there's this whole wealth of knowledge in Judaism that I never admitted or was willing to accept, and I have to start from the beginning in some ways.
Right.
And that's the stage in which every person admits, I don't know the answer, I don't have all the answers, I'm not perfect, I'm flawed, I'm deeply flawed, and I need something transcendent, something from the outside. I can't reach all the answers myself. I can't pull myself out of the bog, like Munchausen. I can't. I need this revelation from above, or this truth or wisdom from above.
Right.
And then separation is, once I have this new language and new light, I can start using it to differentiate between the parts of me that are better and the parts that are worse, the parts that work, the parts that don't work, my ego from my
divinity,
truth-seeking higher self.
Got it.
And then I can disidentify with the lower and identify with the higher. That's the separation.
And the sweetening would then be to bring it back in.
The sweetening is because these 2 stages there's something embittering about them, because I'm not natural. I'm not myself. I don't recognize myself. And I can't just let myself be. I can't just flow. I can't just be whoever I am. I can't just trust my instincts, because I don't trust my instincts anymore, because I realized that my instincts were mixed up, a confused, amalgam of my egoistic desires and my subconscious and my fears and fantasies with my truth-seeking higher self, or my soul. And so there's something bitter in the sense that there's something tense and something that is unnatural. And sweetening is when I'm able to integrate enough of the new light or wisdom, and I can go back to who I was, and then
bring back.
And I've gained it, and now I can teach it. Now I can be it. Now I can project it, and I've integrated it. I don't have to strain myself so much. I don't have to suspect myself so much, which of course leads to the next submission. Separation, sweetening, because it never ends.
So I want to make sure I understood this one. So we got here with the question of if there's a unifying message or theme to your work. Or to your
so it's okay. So to round that up, that would be that once I realized that there's so much wisdom to receive from Judaism, but I asked myself, God, the question. So why did you make me? Why is it for 26 years I was totally immersed in totally different things,
right?
Nothing to do with the Torah. And so the overarching theme for me, my life, my hero's journey, or my, and I think many of us, I'm not the only one, but I have to do it my way to contribute my part to this, is to do, it's 2-directional. From one direction, it's what we call elevating the sparks of wisdom, of truth, from all the many worlds that I inhabited and still inhabit that are outside of the Torah. We do believe that God is everywhere, but it's behind a mask. But
Right.
but there is something behind the mask, and there is something behind the mask that Judaism doesn't have. So one direction is I want to elevate the sparks of truth and wisdom from all other.
What does that mean when you say there's something that Judaism doesn't have?
There are sensibilities, and there's aesthetics, and there's insights. So many insights in Jung. Jung is a great example, and so many others in literature, in movies, in psychology. There's not just Freud and Jung. There's a whole bunch of other people, and there's things there that you can enrich Judaism with. So many things.
Right. Yes.
That was the reason, I think, that so many Jews were distanced. That by divine providence, there was the Enlightenment, there was the Haskalah, there was secularization. And the reason that Jews were dispersed so much among the nations and came so far to be almost the forerunners of so many ideologies is that they could then remember their Jewish identity and their Jewish calling, go back to that, but bring something with it, bring a wealth of those sparks that they could now elevate and bring back into the Torah world and enrich Judaism.
Right.
Because Judaism is not rich enough, it's not full enough.
Okay. Because when you said it's not within Judaism, you're not saying it's not within the Torah, it's not within Judaism.
Yeah,
like
it was originally within the Torah, but it was sort of forgotten. We have the revealed Torah and the full Messianic Torah that is being revealed as we learn and innovate and bring all these ideas back into it. So that's one thing. And the other thing is bringing the light of the Torah out into the world. And then illuminating all the different areas of life using Torah wisdom. And I was also fortunate enough to find a certain person, a rabbi, who's also a Baal Tshuva of many years, and he's doing exactly those things, or that's one of the things that he's doing, or two of the things that he's doing, and that's Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg.
Right.
And it took some time to connect to him because it's hard to follow him in the beginning. But in many ways, what I've been doing ever since is I've been trying, once I could get through the barriers of not understanding first, and also figuring him out, because he appeared to me to be there's something frozen about him, and he seemed without emotions to me at the beginning. The superficial impression I got of him, he's no emotions, because he talks, he whispers, talks like this, and it doesn't have a lot of mimicry. It turns out that it's only in the classes. When you talk to him, it's very different, and there's an awe in the classes that he teaches. He's very concentrated on the content. But if 2 hours in, he becomes more relaxed also, like an hour, 2 hours in. And if you talk to him one-on-one, it's very, very different. And he is, a genius would be putting it mildly, because the genius part is not the main part. There's this brilliance and depth to the way he takes all these deep Torah concepts. And then you can talk with him about anything in the world, and he would light this light on it. The Rebbe would also do the same thing, but there's something about Rav Ginsburg that adds another layer to this, that he connects it to all the details of the Torah. He would find the perfect verse and the word and the gematria.
Right.
And so I'm trying to do these two things, elevate the sparks from the secular into the holy, share the holy light or the wisdom of the Torah with the outside world. And the final thing, which is all together, is trying to explain and elaborate and share with the world all the wisdom of Rav Ginsburg.
Right. I definitely do feel that from listening to your talks, that there seems to be a theme around a bridging of two worlds.
Yep.
Where I grew up, my parents were Baal Tshuva, but they wouldn't want me to say that. Maybe. And I'm not saying about them, but
Why?
Growing up in Crown Heights, so this is the point I'm getting to growing up in Crown Heights, the way the Baal Tshuvas worked was almost like to bury their past, not to highlight it in any way. It was
to pretend you've always been from.
Exactly, right. Yep. Meaning, when I say that about Tshuva, obviously if they didn't want me to say it, I wouldn't say it. What I mean is that it wasn't considered as, if someone noticed they were about Tshuva, that was viewed as an insult, almost like, oh, you noticed something that I didn't want you to see. I was trying to integrate so much that you couldn't tell that I once was. You know, imagine
that's the old school, old generation classic Baal Tshuva story, what you just said. I think outside of Chabad, sometimes it's even worse. They actually try to pretend. That is, they don't even tell the kids. It's like a dark secret.
Oh, that doesn't.
So it's even more extreme. It's not just trying to, but in a metaphorical way,
right,
that you wouldn't tell, is mamish not telling. But if you look at Israeli Balei Tshuva, then the classic example of this is like Uri Zohar. Uri Zohar, you know him, was a famous.
I know.
So in Israel, he's very famous. He was like an amazing film director and stand-up comedian. And in the 70s, all of a sudden, like bolt out of nowhere, age 40, he started being a Baal Tshuva. And he was the loudest, crudest, you know, his movies were the dirtiest jokes and everything. But then he stopped doing movies. Stopped doing movies altogether. And then you had, next generation later, you had Shuli Rand. Shuli Rand is also a singer and an actor. And he started doing religious theater. He became Baal Tshuva.
So
he brought the art. And that, I was a little bit after him. And you could see the shift. That the first generation, they stopped with the art altogether. Only Torah, only Talmud. And the newer ones, there's singers, there's actors. And I was fortunate enough to hear my mashpia, or the person who brought me into the whole story, is that he told me, you don't need to give up on anything. You just add. You don't subtract.
Right.
You don't get rid of anything. You just add. Torah is added to your life. And then I also heard it from Rav Adin Steinsaltz. He said that the whole idea of Judaism, being Jewish, is to be more than a man, not less than a man, or more than human, not less than human. So everything human should be part of Jewish life. Everything that's human. And now we want to add a level, the level that connects it, that ties it together, that I want to be serving God in everything that I'm doing, in everything that I'm reading, everything that I'm learning, everything that I'm teaching. If it's just for fun or distraction, in a way, I'm breaking the world. And the Torah is the way to do it, because the Torah is all about the simple faith that everything comes from the one source, like many other mystical traditions. But the Torah is also then opens up into so many stories and details and commandments and actions and customs. And then this becomes the interface between living a life of serving God or connecting to God and living life.
Right.
With everything that it has to offer.
Yeah, I had this thought once that some ascribe to a belief, right, that everything is an entity. Meaning every idea or school movement is an entity. Every feeling is an entity, right? So if someone is traveling into different things, let's say university, right? There's like a spiritual entity that exists in university. So there were a lot who were advised, don't go to university, for example. And why? Because maybe 80% of people who went to university would be, swallowed up by the entity, so to speak. But then you have some people who went there, and then they came back. So they came face to face with that entity.
They came back from the cold, from the dark.
Right, but it is true. It is true. When I told my parents that I planned to move to Miami, and I was 20 years old to start a business, there was a lot at risk. Right, both from a religious perspective, which was their first concern, how are you going to stay religious, which was a good question.
And marry Jewish.
All of those aspects of it. And how am I going to support myself? And there were a lot of concerns that came up, but a lot of it was based
Worked well.
For now, right? The story's not, the story's not done. Yeah. There could be an email in my inbox. But in any case, there's a sense of like coming close to the entity, right, that could have swallowed someone up, but didn't. Could have swallowed me up in this case, whatever that was, and in some cases nearly did. Right? I mean, I talk about the fact that I was addicted sexually, right, and it was way beyond pornography. It was a lot of other things, and I feel like I came close in a lot of ways by being swallowed up into that world. But then when someone comes back from that, is to say, okay, like I don't have to be not to play with it, but I don't have to be as afraid of that, right? I can bring that information back. So for example, in my father's case, he went to university, right? So that means that the many people who could have been swallowed up by university, he wasn't, right? The proof is that, right, today he lives a Torah lifestyle. So that instead of it being, yes, most people shouldn't do it, but you did do it. And now that you did, there's something you can bring back and share. Should most people choose the life that I did? Not if they want to live a religious life, right? Most people won't.
It's riskier.
It's definitely much riskier.
Part of the whole story here is how to take risks in a conservative way, or in a Jewish careful way, and you have to take. There's another essay about it in the book about this, about taking risks. And as I said before, it's being adventurous and being so, but you have to be very careful. That's the other part of it. The Rebbe was, for example, like you said, he didn't encourage people to go to the university. Right. The opposite. But some people he did.
Yes.
So it depends on the person, depends on the story. And there's also
in the reverse.
Not just what you're going lechatchila to begin with, but with you shouldn't, is what happens when you get there.
Yes.
A lot of the adventures that we go through them anyway. We don't have to look for dangers. We don't have to look for complexities.
Right.
We don't have to look for trouble. There's something Jewish about, I think the balance here is how to strive to lead a very straightforward, good life that's very balanced, that is family-oriented, society-oriented. Jews are very good at this, and rightly so, and we shouldn't let go of this. And it's okay to play it safe, and it's okay to, again, not look for trouble, or not look for things that are crazy or out of the box, but if you listen to what's going on with your life, to divine providence, to accidents, to crises, if you listen to them, the adventure is there.
Right.
And then you realize now you have to expand your consciousness, and you have to come to terms with everything that didn't go according to plan, and then you elevate it, and that's an interesting balance, I think, that touches a lot of things that we're dealing with today.
Right, especially in the reverse, meaning when it's already happened.
Yeah, so that's absolutely, that you didn't choose it.
Right.
It's up to God to complicate things. It's not up to us to complicate things. We need to strive to the very simple, straightforward life. And God would make it complicated enough. You don't have to worry about overcomplicating. He's going to make it very complicated. He's going to bring you illnesses. He's going to bring you... Bezat Hashem not. No. Right. But experience shows you that he does. And then when he does, then you deal with it. I think it's the same with also mental health issues. Some people think we need to dive into our subconscious, pry the heart open with a crowbar, and do open heart surgery, and then go and surface all the issues that may be buried there. And I think that's not the Jewish way. I think the Jewish way is whatever comes up, you don't repress it, you don't ignore it, you have to listen to it. If you repress it, it's not good. Maybe those people doing the crowbar thing, it's because they see a lot of people repressing.
Right.
Yeah, but there's another option. The other option is that you use your natural conscious powers of intellect, of emotion, of sensitivity, of wisdom, and whatever the heart, the subconscious, surfaces of itself. It's just like the adventure happens of itself. You go somewhere, you get tossed somewhere. That means you have to elevate. Doesn't mean you have to go there to begin with.
Exactly.
Because that's like looking for trouble. The same goes for looking for trouble in the subconscious. Let the subconscious surface. If it surfaces like a trauma or a problem or a fear and anxiety, that means now is the time to address it and work with it. But you don't stick your hand into it and pull out more stuff that the time has not yet come. And also, that means you're going to trust your own subconscious to produce something that's objective, that's real. And it's not necessarily so. It may produce something that's very, very mixed up with your own, again, fears and fantasies and anxieties and whatever it is. So you can't heal yourself from there. You need to let things rise, and then you can shed light on them, and then you can work with them.
Is this a segue into psychedelics?
So when I was thinking about the crowbar,
yes,
that was one of the things I had in mind. Yeah, it's not just that, by the way, but that's definitely one of the strongest crowbars.
Right.
And I don't know how much time we have. I have to give a class.
I'm not sure either. Do we have someone here? Let's see the.
I'm worried because I have this class to teach. Are you editing this, by the way, or is it all going on the...
No, this will take out.
This will take out. So it's 6:30 now, and
okay,
the class is at 8. And
it's 10 minutes away.
And a little bit of break. 10 minutes away, a little bit of break, so we can go a little bit more. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so I do want to put a bow on the last topic. In recovery, right, in 12 steps, they have the 12 steps, which are known. They also have 12 principles, and they have something called the 12 promises. So the 12 principles are kind of like, these are the rules that who's a member, for example, who can become a member.
Okay.
You know, or other ideas. You know, they don't own property. They don't own the fact that the program is anonymous. These are all in their principles.
You can't own property?
The 12 steps itself doesn't own property.
Okay.
Because they say that's how politics start. You have assets. You have people fighting over assets. There's money. Like, stay away from.
That's totally not Jewish.
What? Totally not Jewish, but brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, brilliant in its own right. Is stay away from those things that can make. Stay away from those things that can make this journey complicated. Trying to create an organization that's helping people and not becoming an organization, you know, just for itself. Right? Like, we don't need Doge to go into the 12 steps.
Yeah.
They're good. They're efficient.
It's doged. It's already doged.
So in the 12 promises, the founders lay out, these are the 12 things that we can guarantee will happen to you if you commit to the lifestyle of the 12 steps. And one of the 12 promises is you will not forget the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. You know, like the past, which for me was very powerful, especially with addiction and
what's the first half of the?
You will not forget your past.
You will not forget your past,
nor wish to shut the door on it. Right, which for me that very much tied to. When I first came in, I was like, wow, the fact that I had this sex addiction.
That's not an either or. It goes together for me.
What?
You don't forget the past, and that's why it's not nor. I would say something like you don't forget the past, but you don't worship or you don't constantly go back to the past, or you're not a slave of the past.
No, it's saying the same thing, but it's saying that, like, you're not going to forget the past, and you won't wish to shut the door on it. It's like
okay,
it's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't either which, in my case, right, like even within the group, I didn't feel like everyone in the 12-step group heard the messages of the 12 steps.
Okay.
Like, for example, this one, there's a principle around anonymity, which the concept of anonymity, we don't want someone standing up and saying, I'm sober through AA. Why? Because human beings are human, and someone can fall and they say, oh, look, the 12 steps doesn't do anything. So this guy became the poster child. But just because someone doesn't want to become the poster child doesn't mean there's no room to share my story publicly and share the benefits that I had. Like, there's some sort of balance to be had. Anyway, over there, like, that concept of not shutting the door on it, for me, was saying, okay, is there some meaning in the fact that I have a sex addiction? Which I had a big question mark around that. I was very comfortable with addiction because I said I learned so much from this program. I'm so happy that I found it. It was brilliant that there was a path that navigated me here. Look at all this wisdom. Like I said, I found God in the 12 steps. That was the first time I understood. Understood is not a good word. That I experienced prayer. I experienced meditation. I experienced these concepts. So I was very happy. But the question I had is, why couldn't I have one of the cooler addictions? Alcohol or drugs or something else? Why this shameful one? But eventually, as that message kind of sat and irritated me, I said, well, maybe there's something I can do with this message. Maybe there's a reason why I got this addiction, and then it turned it into a purpose and started speaking about it. It's that idea of not shutting the door on the past. I wanted to put a bow. But let's go into psychedelics, because this evening at the shul you're talking about psychedelics. You called it serpents.
The primordial serpent and the psychedelic revolution.
Okay, so give us a.
So I'm not going to explain about the serpent now, because that's a long story.
But we will say that most likely by the time this comes out, there'll be a recording on your podcast
of the class,
of the whole class. So if someone will be a little bit as a teaser.
You can go.
But they can go in.
Hopefully, if all works out, there should be a recording, and you can find it on my YouTube channel, right? It's become something you can't ignore. Every year, you hear more and more people, and then especially frum people also, that are going into either doing an ayahuasca session or doing mushrooms or doing and so I realized that's something that needs a serious addressing. Why is this so appealing? What are people looking for there? And then finally, is it the right way to go or not the right way to go? So that's what I'm asking myself, and I'm now in the, I don't know, maybe early stages, maybe not so early stages, of reading a lot about this and studying this and thinking about this also, and especially looking at this from a Torah perspective, Torah lens. One of the first questions I had was, what happened that the center of gravity of spirituality, of New Age, the whole New Age, world, basically shifted gradually from the Far East, and especially India, and in Buddhism, Hinduism, and their traditions of yoga and meditation. Basically, the whole center of gravity shifted from there to South America, and shamanism, and things that are far more, the words that keep coming up are body, somatic experience, embodiment. So it's not so much about spirituality per se, although for some people it is something very spiritual. It's more about uncovering layers within the subconscious or within our own hearts and souls and our bodies. But the body keeps score of trauma, and so on. And then trying to surface that. And so that's interesting in and of itself, just realizing this realization.
Most people I know who are going, just to, I think, confirm what you're saying, most people I know who start on that path, it's for healing. It's not, oh, I'm interested in understanding more about mysticism or God. I want to get rid of anxiety. I want to get rid of depression.
And, regarding things like meditation or looking for spiritual ecstasy or experiences, the classic image was something like Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aharon, the priest, who sacrificed what is called a foreign fire, and then they were consumed by this fire, basically. And that's the classic message for seeking spirituality that you don't have the vessels for, maybe.
Yes.
That is too extreme. It's too much lights. They break your vessels. You're consumed by the fire. But there is another story of people who were consumed by the fire, and that goes along with another kind of result. That's the story of the rebellion of Korach. The story of the rebellion of Korach.
They're consumed by the ground, no?
So there were the three leaders. There was Korach, Datan, and Aviram, and then there were 250 followers.
Right.
The followers were consumed by fire, very similar to Nadav and Avihu. The leaders fell into the ground. They were swallowed up by the earth. You would think the leaders maybe would go up and the followers would go down, but it's the opposite. And then I realized maybe you can say that about the masses, like the 250 people. That's like people doing it for recreational purposes, and that's maybe also like a trip or some sort of spiritual experiences, maybe. Right. And then it's a bit similar to they could be consumed, or it doesn't necessarily give you. But the leaders, the bright ones, the smart ones, those that are looking for something more meaningful. It's not recreational. We're having a setting, we're thinking, we have kavana, we want to do something meaningful, we're challenging the Torah. They get swallowed up by the earth. They go down. And swallowed up by the earth, the word for earth in Hebrew is adama. And adama comes from the same source as dam, blood, but also dimion, which is
fantasy,
the faculty of the imagination.
Got it.
And if you asked me before of the things that all my things have in common, one of the things they have in common is how to clarify the faculty of the imagination. Because I come from a very visual world of arts and movies and books and comics. And I love mythologies and I love imagery. And then the Torah seems to be far more textual and intellectual, and also the monotheistic idea is that you don't have all these gods, for example. It's not as colorful. But but the color, I like the color. And I like so I'm trying to clarify the imagination. The Kabbalah does this by telling you that God goes into 10 emanations. It also elevates the desire for many gods, but in a good way, because it's all part of one God. So I'm trying to think a lot about the dimion, the imagination, and one of I have to get to the serpent. I didn't plan to, right. But one of the most profound Hasidic explanations for what was the story with the serpent, what is it been a symbol of, is that the idea is that he knew Eve, and his venom is in our blood. Blood is dam, imagination is dimion, earth is adama. It's all part of the same root. And the venom in the blood means that he totally muddled or muddied our faculty of imagination. Our blood is the imagination, is defiled, it's confused. And so we have very pure imagery that is connected to very high things, conflated with nonsense and fancy and things that are very, very distracting. And it's a form of inner psychological idolatry or mythology, not in the good sense, in the sense that it's all over the place. And so the idea that I had in mind was that if you open it up with aggressive substances, very powerful ones that take over your mind for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, you fall into the ground. You get swallowed up by the earth. Meaning, whatever you surface is not reliable. It's not reliable. Because you're doing it in a way that is, you're trusting your medame, that's what's called the koch medame, your faculty of imagination. You're trusting it to faithfully reflect to you what is going on with your heart, with your soul, with whatever it is you were dealing with, and it's not true. To the point that it can give you even the real problems that you have. You would get a falsified version of them, and also to the point, and I heard this and I saw this happening, of you're not discovering things, you're creating things.
What do you mean you saw that happen?
That people felt that they were uncovering some hidden childhood trauma, but it was not real. It was something that was created within the experience.
How would they know or not know?
Because then there was a way of verifying in one of them, and they realized there's something not true. So it's a mixture. There were some true things and not true things,
right?
And so the very idea of trying to have the light of emunah go to the lowest levels is a very good thing. It's a very messianic thing, I would even say. And that's the main reason I think the whole shift happened from India to South America, from more spiritualistic kind of religions to more shamanic, embodied traditions.
So you feel like
the real reason, or the good reason, the high reason, the positive, like the good thing behind the whole thing, is that people feel that the Torah that was only for the mind and only for the heart is not enough. It has to penetrate further, has to go all the way down to the body. It has to wake us up, touch us, transform us in a way that didn't happen before. And what happened was that people, just like before Hasidut, the Judaism was so intellectual, the heart was
right. It feels like it
wasn't touched, and then it came into the heart, and now what people want is to go another step further, and to have it go down from the heart to the body.
But do you feel? Well, so what's the difference between the heart and the body? Because do you feel like it went to the heart?
The body is more experiential and more visceral and more transformative, actually, of who you are. Right, transforms your patterns of behavior, and it transforms your you at the most foundational level. That is, you feel that the light penetrated into the core of your being, your bones and your flesh.
But is it possible that many people have not experienced the benefits of Chassidus? And what I mean by that is, like, in a lot of ways, Chassidus was a revolution, right? In saying, like, I don't understand it completely, but some of the words, right? That it was fairly, cold or vanilla, right? Do this, don't do that, right? And here Chassidus came and infuses a tremendous amount of meaning into everything we do or don't do, and all of these hidden secrets, and suddenly are commonplace for those who are interested in understanding it. But many people's experience of it, and I'm including myself in this many, wasn't something that lit up the heart, wasn't something that truly had the meaning, right? So maybe it's more than you're saying, in the sense that it's not as if it penetrated the heart. Maybe it's less than you're saying.
Even the heart
even the heart it didn't penetrate. Right? So I'm saying
the heart is
that it still feels very cerebral for many of us.
Yeah. And so that's why people are looking for those, what I called, maybe a bit bluntly, the crowbar method of opening the heart, or a way, an external way of opening something that was closed and nothing happened, nothing helps. All those words all those Torah,
Right.
all those Hasidic essays, all those davening, all those, it didn't help. And then you have something that you take, and all of a sudden you get it and you understand it in a far more experiential way. So that I understand. I was fortunate or blessed, I don't know what's the word, to have those experiences, mystical experiences and experiences of coming in a way face to face with the spiritual, with the soul, without any substances. That's how it was for me when my whole journey started. But I think that actively looking for a mystical experience or a spiritual experience, or even this kind of opening of the heart, is not the Jewish way. The Jewish way is it's a harder way, it's a longer way. That's the famous Hasidic idea of the long, short path, long, short road. That it's a question of how much present you are in the learning. If you are truly present and focused, and it's hard today because we're distracted so much, but if you are able to bring your own heart and body, or existence, that's how the way you live, into the study, and you don't need those very, very powerful substances. We have all the substances in our brain, all those substances, nothing is absolutely foreign, but it makes one element far more powerful, takes away inhibitors to make that more powerful. And all this is very, very unbalanced. It's not, the first blessing in our prayer is a chonen la'adam dat. You grant us consciousness.
Yes.
Conscious powers, not the superconscious, not the subconscious. We want to navigate using our consciousness. First blessing in the morning is you give the heart or the rooster, the wisdom, the understanding to tell day and night. If you bring yourself into a state that you can't tell day and night, or you can't tell real and not real because you're hallucinating, and you forsake your conscious self, that is very much not the Jewish way, but I don't think it's the right way.
But it's not the Jewish way for what? Meaning for spiritual experience or for healing?
For both.
For both.
Yeah, for both.
I mean, it's hard to, in terms of like spirituality, I can say like my own experience, and for anyone who asks my opinion, I don't think it's the way for spirituality, because I haven't seen it deliver anything that can live on its own, so to speak. Like, okay, so there's a profound transfer, it's a profound realization of something, and then I'll go right back to normal life. It wasn't earned wisdom, so to speak.
Okay.
But when it comes to healing and trauma and perspectives, I mean, I had, when I began doing medicines, and I'm not someone who, I didn't flirt with drugs before.
Yep.
Because a lot of the way I don't know, lied to myself that I don't have a problem is that with sex is that I didn't have problems in the obvious addictions. So I didn't gamble, I didn't drug, I didn't drink.
So your mind tricked you into thinking you're not addicted.
I don't have, right, I'm not an addict. And that was like my bottom was
very
realizing.
similar with eating, by the way. I think eating disorder is very similar because it's not an official, because you have to eat anyway.
Right.
Just like sex, it's part of life, and eating is part of life. So you have to do it, or you do it, it's part of doing. But it's harder to realize that you've passed the point in which it's not normal.
Correct. Correct. And also, many people say you can't be addicted to it, right? You need an external substance or something to be addicted to. But what are you addicted to? A process? No, of course it's not true. But if you need support for that idea, you have a lot of smart people who believe that. So I didn't flirt with drugs, like I said. But having been in therapy for years, around recovery I was probably going to meetings regularly, several times a week for 7-8 years. And I got sober there. I was married. I began to build a family. I had a business. But I had this anxiety that wouldn't leave me, like absolutely wouldn't leave me. And then when I heard mentions of ayahuasca was more difficult to access than when I was looking. But when I heard mentions of it, I was intrigued. And for me, what I saw was a profound shift with anxiety. And a lot of it that helped me was kind of a spiritual view to life. I'll give you like one experience that I had, which it shifted my whole perspective of challenges. And I found out later through a discussion once with Y.Y. Jacobson that there's a Torah source for what I experienced. But what I felt I experienced myself as an energy, as the words I was using, putting words to what we're experiencing, the words I was using was life force energy. So I'm a life force energy pre-birth. And it was also a space where time didn't exist. It was nothing. And I was very excitedly communicating with other life force energies and said, hey, why don't we go back this time and you'll be my father, you'll be my mother, you'll be the person who molests me, you'll be the first girl who breaks my heart, you'll be, and it was a very excited exchange. Like there was no negativity.
And by the way, that's also described in several places in the Torah, that your soul agrees to everything that is going to happen to it in the future, and you volunteer, whether you were the molested or the molester, whether you were the one to get hurt, the one to hurt, whatever it was.
Yeah.
We all agree, and we forget about it. But that's
right, and that's what I got. That I signed up to this, and then I agreed to forget.
Yeah.
Right, like I'll go in forgetting, but I agreed to all of it. And what it did was it gave me a much softer perspective on all of my previous challenges and experiences. Like there was no guilt or shame or blame or anger or resentment. Not that it was completely gone, but there was a fresh perspective to look at something. And then all future challenges I can hold a little bit softer with it. That was like one experience. But what I found consistently was that it hammered away at my anxiety.
Yep.
And so my own experience is, and I don't know that there were other stuff. Like I wasn't afraid to work. I wasn't afraid to go to therapy. I wasn't afraid to go to the 12 steps. I turned my life over recovering from addiction, but I didn't get these experiences until I began working with medicines. And like I said, most people I know are not running there. Not that they don't exist, but it's not like in my circles, I know are not running there saying like, oh, let me go there to experience a Shabbos, which I know some people do. There are people who say, let's do a Shabbos properly. Instead of doing it on wine, let's do it on ayahuasca. And look, what are we going to touch? It's going to be amazing. And I'm sure it will be in some ways, but that's not that's not like my school of thought or the people in my circles. The reason we're going there is, I mean, real struggle and pain and trauma, and saying, how do we overcome it? And then eventually moving away. Like I haven't done ayahuasca and mushrooms in over a year, both of them, a year and a half.
And that's considered a long time.
But I haven't been doing it for very long, but and I have no intention of going back. Even in those circles, a lot of people say when you get the message, hang up the phone. Do I feel like I got the message? For now, I feel good. For now, I feel good. For now, the challenges that come in front of me, I feel like I've been given the tools to be able to navigate it without. First of all, it's very scary. It's very scary to take something. You could be transported anywhere for any length of time. I mean, it's very scary. Why would I?
Yeah, but that's also what's appealing about it or attractive.
For some people, but it's also very scary.
Yeah.
It's also very scary.
So the question when you tell a story like this, and I heard several stories like this, the question is always two questions. One, is it true that this couldn't have been reached? The good things about it, in another way, maybe a harder way, maybe a slower way, maybe a longer way. And that's difficult to answer once you did it. And the other question is, what are the long-term effects? And that we don't know yet so much. What I can see is that not effects like that I'm saying not long-term effects, the long-term result of that healing, of that problem solved. Does it truly solve it? Does it solve it without any other things? What I see is many people that start on a journey of healing that never ends because they get addicted in many ways to the healing itself.
Yes.
And they become eternal victims also in a way. And they're looking secretly, they're hoping to find another problem and another problem and another layer of difficulty and another layer of trauma and another layer of...
it's an occupational hazard along the way. I don't know that it's... specific to psychedelics. I think it's healing in general that it could become...
That's right. But this is more powerful because that involves also getting the very, very extreme experience in order to work on the healing. So you're secretly attracted to having that experience again. You're telling yourself, no, I'm just getting deeper in my healing process, but it never ends in a way.
Right. I mean, I would say a lot of my message that I carry today is around purpose, and that all of this is meant to channel us towards a specific purpose and do something with it. It's not healing for the sake of healing. It's I don't know that I'll have the microphone forever, that I'll want the microphone forever, but for now, it's certainly one of the messages that I understand what you're saying, but it's not a reason not to go into healing. It's just when you go in there, I mean, we have to see the other side of it. I don't know which sides of the world you've seen as far as this, but like in terms of the people severely addicted. I was like, last night I was sitting with someone asked me if I can sit with a guy. He attempted suicide 3 times and he got a family, 2 kids. He doesn't want to kill himself. They were spaced out over multiple years. The first time was, I think, 10 years ago. And then, 4 years later, and he's done psychedelics and hasn't had reprieve. I just want to be clear. Like
hasn't
had reprieve. I'm saying he hasn't had reprieve. But, and the reason...
Reprieve meaning?
He's still suicidal.
Yeah.
And he had another attempt recently, and his thoughts are still very much there. He has a lot of suicidal thoughts, and someone asked me if I would sit down with him. So, I mean, for a guy like this is an extreme example. I'm just trying to understand, like sometimes in the extreme, we can understand someone's perspective. It's an extreme example like this. If there's the potential that a medicine could help him, I mean, how would you say no? How can someone say no? How can someone suggest?
Okay, so there's a big difference between severe cases of real objective trauma or another kind of problem, like repeated suicidal thoughts, not the regular ones that a lot of people have. You're talking about something that he tried, for example. It's a big difference. Someone who thinks about it, someone who tried it 3 times. I think there's a big difference between people with real severe trauma or real issues like actually having tried to kill themselves and almost everyone else. And every rule has an exception, and it would be careless, not irresponsible of me to rule something out for everyone. Because, but what I'm seeing today is not this. I'm seeing that everyone feels they have trauma, right? In a way, that's true. In a way, that's true.
Yeah.
In a way, life is traumatic. Being born is traumatic. But then it also takes away the meaning of the word. If you have people coming back from the Nova party who witnessed all their friends being murdered, you have people, hostages coming out, and you have people who were molested in some way, some horrible way, especially by a person they trusted, and all this is different from every person saying, I have this and that trauma. They didn't go through this. So I think it's different. So that's one qualification, is that I don't know what to say about something, I'm talking about people as a general thing that people are saying that we have to use, we have to go. And another thing is that I was told this by a very serious doctor who is very much against the use of psychedelics, not just for recreation purpose, also in ceremonial, the medicinal context, as it's called, who believes that with proper research, which has already begun, very measured and tested usage of those same substances will one day, and he thinks it's a good thing, will replace a psychiatric medicine that we now have,
right?
Which in many ways are very aggressive, and they solve problems, or they help people. They don't solve them. They help people with psychiatric issues, usually by kind of quarantining the problem.
You're saying psychiatric
the modern chemical psychiatrics, they quarantine the problem. They dissociate aspects of the brain or the mind. And then you're not able to work on them. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to quarantine them. And maybe these substances that come from the plant world, meaning they're not so chemical, not as aggressive, and then you can use them with certain very carefully made dosage. Not every other shaman or person who says that I went to study somewhere. Now I'm talking something very professional, very medical. And then so that's not a very interesting take. That there will be a usage, but it's not what we're seeing today. It won't be something that everyone's going to the ceremony and going in the whole 8-hour or whatever trip.
Right. So I think that listen, even the way I started doing it is not the way I would do it today. Mm-hmm. Right. Like even myself, I feel like, remember once one of the first times I did medicines, the first message that came to me was, I'm in the lion's den.
Yep.
And before then, one of the ways it came to me was I was looking around the room and saying, okay, if it gets a little spicy for me, like, who can I trust? Before I take, I want it like in my clear mind, who can I trust? It was the shaman with a few of his helpers. And there was one guy, just a Spanish guy, and I trust him. I don't know why, but I said, okay, if I get spin out of control, it's a trusted face. So, and I felt good. I made the decision while I was conscious. Anyway, I
Yeah.
started spinning out. The first thing, it's a lion's den. I call him over. So he comes to me. I said, I'm freaking out over it. I said, what's your name? He says, Daniel. I said, of course your name's Daniel. We're in the lion's den.
Awesome.
Right? So, but my point is, my point there is that there are ways that I did it previously, which I wouldn't today, and I wouldn't recommend to others. There was much less. I mean, when I started, it's only 5 or 6 years ago, but there was even less information. I felt a strong calling, and I went. And my hope is that it gets more mainstream and more recognized. The fact, for example, that these substances a lot of them are considered Schedule I substances in the U.S. with no medicinal value. I mean, this is crazy. Like, you see people, there's some medicinal value. It's not none, right? There should be some research. Yeah, the hope is that it becomes front and center, and then you have professionals with all of their years and experience that can bring that together with the use of these plants and see how we can.
So I think the order should be opposite. I think the order should be opposite. It's more probable that it'll happen the way you just described it,
right?
Because that's the way the world works. but we should be doing everything in our power to make it the opposite order. That's the way I see it. Not to go into not to try it out in all kinds of ways. Again, because I think the whole idea of losing your conscious control of your mind is not only very risky, but it's also the opposite way to go if you want to grow. You're opening a trapdoor into a world of feelings and emotions that is meant to be behind the trapdoor. And the point of growing, I think that's one of the Jewish messages for the world, is that we go up and we go towards the light and we go towards the straight, and we're not looking. If you look at there was what is called the ways of the Emorites. These are a whole bunch of divination and reading from the dead and guessing and all kinds of things, and they all have to do with active ways of trying to make the world more mysterious and mystical and exciting and bringing out the forces of nature, basically. It wasn't so psychological in that time. So it was more about like divination, things like this, but it was all about pulling out the magic of nature, the magic of the world, the magic powers that are operating, and all of this is negated. It's all pushed away. You don't do this, you don't, all of them. Ella, what you need to do, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha, you need to walk sincerely, wholeheartedly, simply, in the way of God, and then true prophecy, which is Kol Dmama Daka. It's very, 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 very refined. It's not the noise. It's not the wind. It's not the fire. Right? The story of Eliyahu.
Yeah.
You don't look for the wind. You don't look for the fire. You don't look for the excitement. The opposite. You run in the opposite direction, and you try and get a truth that's very pure and right. And then it's up to you to take that laser beam and use it to touch your own, the ailments of your heart, or the weaker points and all the wounds that need to be healed. You even see this, and there's a story that the Mashiach, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, or maybe I forgot the name of the rabbi, that he asks Eliyahu, where can I find the Mashiach? He tells him the Mashiach is in the house of the lepers outside of Rome. And you can tell him, you can recognize him, because everyone is taking off all their bandages and cleaning their whole wounds up and putting them on again. He does it one by one. He takes one bandage off and he heals it, and then he puts it on and opens the other one. And there's an allure to have this experience of undressing and falling into my own unconscious and experiencing in a very visceral, very powerful way everything that's going on there. And it's the very opposite of the Jewish gift to the world. Mamash, that's how I see it. The Jewish gift to the world is that it's all about refinement, and it's all about doing it, very carefully, and it has to do with using it consciously, doing it consciously through learning and meditating. There's even the famous story of Rabbi Nachman with the Chacham and the Tam, the wise man and the simpleton.
Yes.
And the wise man is looking for the experiences and for things to do and for things to discover about himself. And the Tam is saying, I want to walk with God. I want to walk sincerely with God. And he ends up being very wise and with having all the wisdom. And the other one goes from worse to worse.
Okay, I don't know that we're 100% disagreeing with each other. I think that I'm probably seeing a different subset of people than you are. So I'll explain what I mean. I mean, when most of the examples you gave, outside of the one with the bandages and the wounds, were more about, like when you say tamim tiyat and Rosh Hashanah, okay, great. I mean, in terms of spirituality, in terms of finding God, in terms of mystical experiences, like the same way I wouldn't recommend to anyone, oh, you want to find God? Let me tell you where. I know this beautiful meeting that you can go to where a bunch of sex addicts meet and you'll find God. No, don't go there, because it can go sideways also. I've seen people who were only interested in pornography, and then they walk to a group of people who found a lot of other sins to get excited in, and they get infected with those sins also, right? So it's not without risk, but I found God there, right? So what I'm saying is that for healing, I found that it can offer certain healing. At the same point in time, like I came in with 10 or 12 years of what I consider serious inner work, right? Between therapy, between recovery, very, very committed. Journals like this. I mean, I was very committed to work. And when I got into psychedelics, I felt like I had language for these things. It wasn't like, it didn't feel, I mean, some of them felt overwhelming, but when I walked out of the experience, it was like, oh, okay, this is similar to this process. This is similar to what I learned here. I had something to do.
Yeah, so you had some vessels. So it makes it different if you're coming in with, it makes it...
Well, meaning if it's like, at what point is someone going?
It's not as crazy or risky or tetherless.
Right. Also, at this point, it's like the way I look at it now. I haven't written off psychedelics, and also there are different ones. There's some that hallucinate, some others, but we don't have to get into that conversation here. But to me, I'd really much prefer to work through an issue in this dimension. Like I really would. But if I got to the space that I wasn't able to, and I really felt stuck, then I'm open to going back. But I'd really prefer hammering it out here. But when I look back, is it possible there was another option? It's possible. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, when you're talking about seeking out spirituality, it's probably not the way. If someone hasn't done any healing, so what? This is going to be your first foray into healing? Let me take ayahuasca? Like, what have you done? How do you know you can't solve it with a few sessions with a therapist? How do you know you can't solve it in many other things? But the other side of it is that in terms of healing, let's take psychiatric medicines. I think it's something like 20% of Americans are prescribed psychiatric medicines. So is that the way to go, to hook someone on something or maybe 2 or 3 experiences could solve the same problem, and you don't have to set someone on addiction to the substance, like you said, sidelines or quarantines issues. So I guess based on the nature of what I speak about, I invite people to have these kind of conversations. I recognize that it's not everyone's experience that, oh, there's some guy suicidal, can you please meet with him? But I've spoken, the amount of even rabbis that I've spoken to, addicted to drugs, addicted to sex, like that's their world that they're living in. And so, okay, it's not suicidal, but it's still very, very extreme. The amount of marriages that I've seen saved from psychedelics, it's high up there. It's high up. I can think of many, like several examples in front of mind right now of marriages which were on the brink, and someone said, hey, like, what are you gonna do? Tear your family apart? Like, give it a shot. Yeah,
I hear what you say, and I've heard this again. I'm hearing this from a lot of people, and I'm not. It would be foolish to totally dismiss, but I also know that most people today are so lost in a world of very, very superficial distractions, and are so unaware of another way of learning and working on themselves internally, that when you say nothing else worked, I believe you. But I also know that there's still things to explore before opening up the hood of the brain and playing with substances. And the reason is that I know, and my wife also does this, the levels that, for example, she as a therapist, the levels in which she works on herself with journal writing and meditating, and we call hitbodedut and hitbonenut. And the kind of Torah that we learn together and apart, and the kind of depth that we can reach in inner work is something that most people are not aware of. And the reason they're so excited by the results that they're seeing is that for them it's undreamt of that you can reach those levels without going through such a very, very powerful, very visceral, physical experience.
Right, and this I agree with you.
It's more of a testimony to the impoverished inner world that we live in today than it is a testimony to the power of those substances. That's what I'm saying.
And I understand that. I understand exactly what you're saying from that perspective. But here we are also, right? Meaning we are in this space. So what's done?
So that makes it understandable. It makes it forgivable in a way, in the sense that I don't judge people who go there. I know so many people. I try very much not to be judgmental because I because of what we just said. But that's the generation we live in. But I also don't want to give up on elaborating and opening up and spreading the language and the music and the tone of the kind of Torah learning that I know exists and the kind of inner work that I know exists, which is far superior because it's so subtle and refined and works far more gradually. And there's the whole Hasidic approach is that you don't look for shortcuts. It's so fundamental. It's so fundamental to the whole idea of Hasidut. It's on the front page of the Tanya.
I understand.
And giving, I see that as this whole spiel now with this whole is giving up on that principle. And I I can understand and I'm sympathize with people who say I tried so many things, didn't work. So what do you want? Do you want me to all my life, suffer from whatever it is if I have this? So again, I don't judge, but I do look at it with regret and a certain sorrow, and also it strengthens me in trying to share and elaborate in as much as to the best of my abilities what I think true, deep, profound, inner, present, mechuvan Hasidic learning and working is.
Right. So what I would say is that's what I think is missing. Meaning, if I grew up in Crown Heights, right? So I grew up immersed.
That's a good example of a place that appears to be the closest to Hasidut, and could often be as farther than
right. To me, the concept.
Than what it should be.
Right. To me, the concept of the whole idea of avodah and working on oneself was not. I didn't see it. I didn't have any model for it. I didn't witness it. It wasn't.
You talk about it, but you don't see it. Yeah?
I didn't see it in practice. Yeah. I didn't see it in practice. I shared this metaphor on an earlier podcast, but not everyone listens to all of them, so I'll share it again. With COVID, one of the Dr. Zelenko had this protocol, which I don't know if Dr. Zelenko, he had a protocol. He became very famous during COVID, saying not to take the vaccine and not to, and even going to hospital, it's not necessary. There are treatments you can do. So what he suggested was hydroxychloroquine and zinc, and something also just in case it was an infection like a Z-Pack, but hydroxychloroquine and zinc. And the way the medicines work is that what's really needed for the body to fight viruses is zinc, but the body doesn't absorb it well. So you take hydroxychloroquine, which opens the body's pathways to absorb the zinc, and then the zinc can go in. Hydroxychloroquine by itself doesn't do anything. And zinc by itself, the body rejects. And I kind of felt, for me, right, to me, now I learn more. I'm much more likely to pick up a book on Torah than I am to pick up a book on psychology or a book on other stuff. And if I do, I'm looking for someone with some sort of spiritual bend or a deeper perspective than a lot of the books I was reading previously. But I feel like this process opened me up to be able to receive that information. In many ways, the medicines
For many people, retrospectively, it's like that they had all kinds of peak, what was called peak or extreme experiences, and
Yes.
that opened it up. Sometimes also near-death experience.
Yeah, 100%.
But I wouldn't recommend it.
Right, I hear.
That people try it. That's
No, I hear what I'm seeing and witnessing in real life is tons of people who are addicted, tons of people who are struggling in heavy ways. And I'm not a proponent of everyone doing it. I'm not a proponent of people doing it in spiritual or for mystical pursuits. But what I am a proponent of is having it there, that when someone is exploring, okay, I need to get help, what's available to me? So put it as one of the options. Like, why do we have to put it to the side and saying like, because of Avodah Zarah, because of like all these ideas that when I've spoken to people, I've never been able to get an explanation. And whenever I spoke to, when I've spoken to rabbis, like practically about a situation, it's like this specific situation, like what would you do? I guess you have no choice, right? They can help, and you speak to a couple of people, and you can speak to plenty of doctors who've had very good experiences with this, and say, okay, then is there a way to do it, right? The question always is there a way to do it without any of like, there's nothing Avodah Zarah about a mushroom. A mushroom's a mushroom, right? So it's a way to strip it.
That depends on how you define Avodah Zarah and what is the.
But it's a way to strip it of all those things. That's a question. That's a question they'll ask, right? But just for someone to put like a black thing over it and say like, no, this no-go zone. It's like, how long are we going to let people suffer? I mean, you have people who've gone to rehab 10 times and haven't had.
So again, there's a difference between the special extreme cases and also.
What I'm saying is there are a lot of extreme cases. When 20% of America's had extreme cases, it's like the extreme is not so far out there. The amount of overdoses, the amount of addictions, the amount of problems.
I'm reading what's happening now is we're both fighting on who has the last word. That's what I feel a little bit is happening, and I don't have time.
Okay. No, it's not so much about last word. I was actually saying, I'm actually saying differently. Like, I think we agree on a lot. I think that in terms of like what you're talking about, like all these things need to be shared and need to be spoken about. More often now when I talk about psychedelics, I talk about the cautiousness that's necessary around it.
Yep.
Because there are a lot of people who, when I first started speaking, there weren't too many people talking about it, but now there are. So no one needs that voice. I think there's a lot of room for cautiousness. What I'm actually sharing is not trying to have the last word. It's trying to say that I agree with you on all that spiritual and mystical stuff, and I think you agree with me on the healing side of it. I think the only difference between us is that because of what I speak about, I'm likely to get those calls. Like I'm likely.
No, but
to
I'm
hear
far more
so
skeptical. I'm far more skeptical about the healing. Also, I'm more skeptical than you are about.
I understand.
Because of what I said, that you unleash things that I don't think are clarified in the mind, and then I think, I am more skeptical about the long-term results about this whole thing.
Someone said to me, I remember said to me, "What are the long-term impacts of taking mushrooms?"
Yeah.
I said, "I don't know, but I know the long-term impacts of not taking them." So anyway, listen,
and that's the third thing we have to add is what will be the long-term effect of doing true and deep inner work combined with emunah and finding purpose and a lot of other things.
But I'll tell you one of the most important things, and this is what I want to highlight that you did say, which
so you are trying to get the last one.
What? No, this is one I want to underline this. You started this by saying you want to answer 3 questions, and the second question was I think the most important was what are people searching for when they're going there, right? And I think that most people when they talk about it, if they have an opposing voice to it, then it's like, oh, this is bad. Okay, and it's someone's opinion doesn't matter because people are going there, right?
Yep.
So my opinion, your opinion, right? It's not changing. But the question is, and that's the real question, is what is someone searching for when they're going there? What is someone finding? And that I think is very important, especially for those who are interested in teaching Judaism. I remember years ago I had this conversation with Simon Jacobson, and he's been somewhat of a voice against psychedelics. And I said, Simon, this is happening.
Yep.
Like, whether you like it or not, I'm telling you, I'm seeing it, I'm living it, and I'm seeing the exponential growth of this.
Yeah.
This has to be spoken about in one way or another. And I think that's the most important question is what are people looking for what are people receiving, and how can they receive that?
So here we are 100% in agreement on both sides of what you just said. It's happening anyway. I'm not, I don't have any power. You don't have any power.
Yes.
Maybe you have more than me. It depends how many followers we have on YouTube, but it's happening anyway. And you're right. The main thing is what are people really looking for? And I think that's the main thing to be addressed and listened to. And something very profound is there's a shift. There's a major, profound shift in what people are looking for even. And which I think that at heart and at root is a positive thing. They're looking for authenticity, and they're looking to no longer live with inner splits. between what they have in their head and what they have in their heart and what they're actually living.
Yeah, I think one of the nature of the time we're living in is that there is time. People have more time.
More leisure.
Time than
to
they've had in the
explore
past.
and to think and to...
Yeah. And,
so Be'ezrat Hashem,
right, and it's important to answer some of these questions that maybe in other environments wouldn't even have the opportunity to surface.
Yeah,
but
and I totally agree. And what I'm trying to do is exactly what you told Rabbi Simon Jacobson, is that I'm trying to learn it and address it and talk about it.
No, and for that,
explore
I 100%. I think it's so important, and I wish more did it and spoke to it, because it needs language. And then for those who choose to do it, there's definitely a vacuum created, meaning there's these spiritual and mystical like experiences, even if someone's going for healing, that those open up. And it's important for them to have the language. And I was fortunate to have both like the language of recovery, but in a like the healing in a spiritual lens, and also a lot of Jewish terminology. I remember when I went back to learning like sichas and other stuff, and I was like, wow, there's so much here, so much richness and depth that I didn't understand how much of it was like a personal development manual. It's not the right word, but it's dealing with all of those inner issues that I never read in that way.
It clicked to you that Hasidus is actually real.
Right. That's why I say the hydroxychloroquine and the zinc, and maybe that's the real answer, is that I don't feel like when I was being taught Hasidus, it was practical.
Yeah.
It was like to teach in a way that drives it home and saying, I learned this and I applied this to my life in this way, and you can too. A lot of it was theoretical, and then the feeling like you shared earlier, that like the jackhammer, what do you call it? The crowbar. Right. A lot of what I experienced and others was that a lot of the problems were put to the side.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you're putting the problems to the side, but now I have these problems. What do I deal with it? So you're not showing me how Chassidus deals with it. So here I am finding something.
Chassidus originally was called Divrei Elokim Chaim, the words of the living God, or the living words of God. It has to be alive.
Right. Meaning it has to deal with our...
And it has a tendency of dying, and we have to revive it.
That's how, right. That's what I meant about the heart. Like you said, like Chassidus reached the heart, not reached the body.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know.
As a Torah, as a language, but then the work itself is something else. I think we can end this conversation the very Hasidic way by saying L'chaim, L'chaim.
Okay.
To life.
Thank you so much for coming out. I hope it's as successful as the last one. Thank you.